I have heard of a land on a faraway strand, in the Bible the story.
Verse 44. So now come, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me. And Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. Jacob said to his kinsmen, gather stones. So they took stones and made a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Laban called it Jagar-Shahadutha, and Jacob called it Gilead. I like Jacob's name better. It's shorter and easier to say. Laban said, this heap is a witness between you and me this day, therefore it was named Gilead. And Mizpah, for he said, may the Lord watch between you and me when we are absent from one another. If you mistreat my daughters, or if you take wives beside my daughters, although no man is with us, see, God is witness between you and me. Laban said to Jacob, behold this heap, and behold the pillar which I have set between you and me. This heap is a witness, the pillar is a witness, that I will not pass by this heap to you for harm, and you will not pass by this heap and this pillar to me for harm. I'm going to stop right here and just make this observation. Basically, what is the role that this heap of stones is playing? Okay, it's a reminder of the agreement, but what is it actually doing based on that last verse that we just read? It is a line of demarcation. Yeah, it is. Think about when your young kids are squabbling and they stay in the same bedroom, and you say, okay, you stay on your side and you stay on your side, and all the TV shows, they actually draw a line through the middle of the room. That's kind of what this heap of stones is. He says, look, I'm not going to pass this. If I come after you for harm, when I see these things, I'm going to remember this agreement, and I'm not going to come past this to harm you, and you don't come back and pass this to harm me. And so that's kind of a line of demarcation and a reminder of their agreement with one another. The God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us. So Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. Now, I want you to notice that this is Laban that's doing all this talking. And he is talking about the Lord being a witness between them, and he is making this agreement based on the authority that would come from God. That's kind of important because it indicates that they were not idolaters in the sense that people would become idolaters later, where they have invented gods to describe different things or explain different things, but their household idols were just their own personal representations of God. Now, when the law of Moses is given later, one of the things that God says through Moses is that they should not do what? Make any graven images. So God's going to put a stop to this kind of stuff. But at this point, apparently, this has come up and become a practice among the people that Abraham have come from. Jacob, it says in verse 54, says, offered a sacrifice on the mountain, called his kinsmen to the meal, and they ate the meal and spent the night on the mountain. And so they have a sacrifice and they eat a meal together. Early in the morning, Laban arose, kissed his sons and his daughters, and that's speaking about his grandchildren, and blessed them. And Laban departed and returned to his place. So he went home. So that is how this ordeal ends between Jacob and Laban. They come to an agreement, and each go to their own corner. Laban goes back to Haran, and where is Jacob headed? He's headed to Canaan. I almost I'm leading singing tonight. I almost led to Canaan's land. I'm on my way. I wish I would have done that now. Anyway, Jacob is headed to Canaan and bringing his family back. Now, who is in Canaan? Who did Jacob leave behind when he left? His brother Esau. That's actually the reason he left, right? What did Esau want to do? Kill him. Now, who has told him to go back to Canaan? The Lord did. So, he's headed back to Canaan, and his parents are there, and his brother's there, and chapter 32 deals with the interchange between him and Esau as he heads home. It says, as Jacob went on his way, the angels of God met him. Jacob said when he saw them, this is God's camp. So he named the place Mahanaim. Jacob sent messengers before him to his brother Esau in the land of Seir, in the country of Edom. He also commanded them, saying, thus you shall say to my lord Esau, thus says your servant Jacob, I have sojourned with Laban and stayed until now. I have oxen and donkeys and flocks and male and female servants. I have sent to tell my lord that I may find favor in your sight. And the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, we came to your brother Esau, and furthermore he is coming to meet you, and 400 men are with him. And Jacob was greatly afraid. Why? The last time he saw him, he was plotting to kill him. And now he gets told, look, he's coming. We went and told him what you said, and he packed up and headed this way, and he's got 400 people with him. Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, and he divided the people who were with him and the flocks and the herds and the camels into two companies. For he said, if Esau comes to the one company and attacks it, then the company which is left will escape. So he's using his brain, and he says, you know what? I'm going to divide up. He can only come after one of us. And whichever group he goes after, at least the other one can escape. Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who did say to me, return to your country and to your relatives, and I will prosper you. I'm unworthy of all the loving kindness and of all the faithfulness which thou hast shown to thy servant. For with my staff only I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become two companies. So what he's saying here is he's in a prayer to God, and he's acknowledging the blessings that he's received from God. He left with nothing but a staff. He's coming back with servants and a family and 2 wives and flocks and so many people that he can divide them up into 2 companies. And he says, deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he come and attack me, the mothers with the children. For thou didst say, I will surely prosper you, and make your descendants as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. So, in this prayer, Jacob also does something else. What's he do? He reminds God of the promise that he made. He said, when you came to me and told me to go back, you promised me that you were going to prosper me. And you said that you're going to make my descendants as the sand of the sea. What we're seeing here is Jacob, unlike some other people, when he became afraid of what was going to happen and concerned that he and his family might be killed, he turned to God for deliverance. And he prayed to God, and he said, look, you said for me to go back, and you said that I would be prospered. So I'm asking you to deliver me from Esau. So he spent the night there, and he selected from what he had with him a present for his brother Esau. 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 30 milking camels and their colts, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, and 10 male donkeys. And he delivered them into the hand of his servants, every drove by itself. And he said to his servants, pass on before me, put space between droves. And he commanded the one in the front, saying, when my brother Esau meets you and asks you, saying, to whom do you belong, and where are you going, and to whom do these animals in front of you belong? Then you shall say, these belong to your servant Jacob. It is a present sent to my lord Esau, and behold, he is behind us. And so he gets all of these different things together, and he sends them out in groups. So the goats, and then the lambs, and then the camels, and then the different things. He tells them, he instructs them, create some space between you and the people behind you. And what he's trying to do here is kind of amplify the gift, not just deliver it all at one time so he doesn't really know what he's getting, but deliver it in pieces so he realizes, wait a minute, this is a lot of stuff, and to create time, spacing. Every time that he stops and deals with one of these servants, that is creating some more time for Jacob in his companies. So he's using good sense and trying to appease his brother before his brother can get to him. We might also say that he's trying to offer propitiation to his brother. Then he commanded also the second and the third and all those who followed the drove, saying, after this manner you shall speak to Esau when you find him. You shall surely say, behold, your servant Jacob is also behind us, for he said, I will appease him with the present that goes before me. Then afterward I will see his face, perhaps he will accept me. So the present passed on before him, while he himself spent that night in the camp. And so he stays at camp with all of his people. He sends the servant and the gifts ahead. He arose that same night, took his 2 wives, his 2 maids, his 11 children, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream, and he sent across whatever he had. Okay, what's a ford? It's not a fury or a Taurus or anything else. What's it mean he crossed the ford of the Jabbok? It is a feature of water, particularly a feature of a stream or a river. If you watched old Westerns, they talk about going across the ford a lot. That was a place where there was a narrowing of the waterway and a shallowing of the waterway where it was safe to cross. When people were going across the country in covered wagon trains, they would find places in the river, fords, where they could get the wagons across. Cattle drives do the same thing. That's what he's doing here. He goes to a place where you can safely cross, and he crosses with his family and with all of his stuff. He took them and sent them across the stream, and he sent across whatever he had. It said in verse 23, and Jacob was left alone, and the man wrestled with him until daybreak. Now I'm going to stop there before we get into this next part of the story. What he's now done is he sent out all of his people and got them safely across the Jabbok, and now he's encamped by himself. So he's got his people divided up into 2 companies. He's got them in different places than himself. He's got these other servants bringing gifts to his brother up ahead of him, slowing his brother down and trying to appease him in the meantime. And the thought process is, by the time my brother gets here, he'll just be getting to me, and maybe I can preserve all my family if my brother is not receptive to me. So he's by himself. And we're told that that night while he is by himself, a man wrestled with him until daybreak. Hosea chapter 12 and verse 4. You got a moment, flip over to Hosea 12 and verse 4. Look at what the prophet Hosea would be inspired to write many years later. And I'll actually back up to verse 2 of Hosea 12. The Lord also had dispute with Judah and will punish Jacob according to his ways. He will repay him according to his deeds. In the womb, he took his brother by the heel, and in his maturity, he contended with God. Yes, he wrestled with the angel and prevailed. He wept and sought his favor. Hosea is writing about the events that we are fixing to read about. And Hosea says that this was a period of him contending with God, or fighting, wrestling with God. And so that is what we need to understand is going on here. Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. And when he saw that he had not prevailed against him, he touched the socket of his thigh, so the socket of Jacob's thigh was dislocated while he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for the dawn is breaking." But he said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." So he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." He said, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel. For you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed." Now, I don't know if you'll regard, I taught a sermon about this event some months ago. This event that took place this night is symbolically representative of what goes on with all of the people of God spiritually. We strive with God. What makes it, or what makes us prevail, is when we don't give up. When we keep working and we keep striving, we refuse to let go. There's an aspect of his character that's being revealed here. And his name is changed to reflect that. What's your name? Jacob. Not anymore, but Israel. Which means, anybody want to guess? Strives with God. That L at the end of the name, at the end of a lot of Hebrew names, is a shortened form of Elohim, which is one of the names of God. And so it means strives with God. This is not strives with God in a bad way. This is strives with God the way that we all strive with God. Jacob asked him and said, "Please tell me your name." But he said, "What is it? Why is it that you ask my name?" And he blessed him there. So Jacob named the place Peniel, for he said, "I have seen God face to face, yet my life has been preserved." Now, I read Hosea 12 for a reason, because Hosea 12 specifies that he did what? That he wrestled with God, that he contended with God. And that is exactly what he says at the end. "I have seen God and prevailed." It is many people's opinion, and I concur, that this is probably an epiphany of the Christ before he was manifested in the flesh in the person of Jesus. It also refers to him as an angel or a messenger in several places where this happens, but that's what I'm convinced that's what is who this was regarding. And that's what he means when he says, I've seen God face to face. There are other places in the Bible that says no man has seen God at any time. This is not him seeing God in his natural state. This is him seeing God as this man whom he strove with. And that's where it started, you'll recall, that he wrestled with a man. So he's called a man at one place, he's called an angel in another place, he's called God in another place. All of those would eventually be a fitting moniker for the Savior. So anyway, I've seen God face to face, yet my life has been preserved. Now the sun rose upon him just as he crossed over Penuel, and he was limping on his thigh. Therefore, to this day, the sons of Israel do not eat the sinew of the hip, which is on the socket of the thigh, because he touched the socket of Jacob's thigh in the sinew of the hip. Some scholars suggest that this is talking about the sciatic nerve and that place where it goes through the hip, and that explains his limping. Anyway, there was never a law given among the Israelites that they could not eat that part of the animal, but apparently, according to this, there was a tradition that arose because of this event and the things about this event, and in honor of that, they did not eat the part of the hip socket that was touched here on Jacob. Chapter 33 goes on. Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau was coming. 400 men with him. So he divided the children among Leah and Rachel, the two maids, put the maids and their children in front, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph last. But he himself passed on ahead of them, bowed down to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. Esau ran to meet him and embraced him, fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. That is not what Jacob was expecting. This doesn't have anything to do with the story that's being told in the Bible, but there is a sidebar lesson that I think is extremely valuable that we can take away from this, because it happens, I suspect, all the time. I can't really say all the time. I know it happens with me all the time. Very often, what I anticipate and what I struggle with because of that anticipation very often turns out not to be what happens. And we can get ourselves into a lot of trouble. It's not by accident that between his becoming afraid of Esau and offering that prayer to God, and Esau actually coming to him and giving him a kiss, we have this picture of him wrestling with God. He knew the promise of God. What was the promise of God? I'm going to make you a great nation. Your descendants will number like the sand of the seashore. What should he have known? Some of them would have been spared. At least some of them were going to escape. There's a story a little earlier in this ordeal where Isaac is the single son of Abraham. And God says to him, I'm going to multiply your descendants like the sand of the seashore, like the stars of the heavens. And then he tells him to do what? To kill his son. And what did Abraham do? He didn't act like it. He went out to do it. He was going to do it. God had to stop him from doing it. There's a big difference. He wasn't just feigning that he would do it. He was in the process of doing it. And God stopped it. We find out in the New Testament that his general attitude was, if God has to raise him from the dead, then that's what he'll do. He believed God's promise. What we see here in Jacob is what I think is a lot more common among the people of God, which is we know what God has said and we know what God has told us to do, but we're afraid it's not going to work out the way that God said it was going to work out. And we feel like we need to start making moves to help the situation. What he should have done was trust God. Should have gone home. God knew what he was saying. He knew what he wanted him to do. He knew what he meant when he said go home. He intended to fulfill his promise. Did Jacob need to understand how he was going to fulfill his promise? Jacob needed to believe that God would fulfill his promise, whatever God needed to do. Fact of the matter is, Esau was glad to see him. He lifted his eyes and saw the women and the children and said, "Who are these with you?" He said, the children whom God has graciously given your servant. The maids came near with their children, and they bowed down, and Leah likewise came near with her children, and they bowed down. And afterward, Joseph came near with Rachel, and they bowed down. And he said, "What do you mean by all this company which I've met?" Now, what's that talking about? What do you mean by all this company that I've met? Yeah, this is the people that he met on the way with all the animals that he was giving him. He said, "To find favor in the sight of my Lord." But Esau said, "I have plenty, my brother. Let what you have be your own." And Jacob said, "No, please, if now I have found favor in your sight, then take my present from my hand, for I see your face as one sees the face of God, and you have received me favorably. Please take my gift which has been brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have plenty." Thus he urged him, and he took it. So Esau says, "I don't need these gifts." The gifts, which, by the way, God hadn't told him to do apparently, were unnecessary. He didn't have to buy Esau's favor. God's the one that told him to leave when Esau was trying to kill him. Why would he send him back to be killed by Esau? It kind of reminds me of what's going to happen as we move forward in the story when Moses delivers them out of Egyptian bondage. And they get to the Red Sea and the Egyptian army's behind them, and what do the people start saying? "Have you brought us out here to just let us die?" Well, of course not. And again, Jacob should have understood. Even though he didn't know what would happen, he should have understood that God would see his promise through, and that God would have his best interest at heart, and that when God said, "Go back to Canaan," that it was what he needed to do. Esau said, let us take our journey and go. It's verse 12. I will go before you. But he said to him, my Lord knows that the children are frail, and the flocks and the herds which are nursing are a care to me. And if they are driven hard one day, all the flocks will die. Please let my Lord pass on before his servant, and I'll proceed at my leisure, according to the pace of the cattle that are before me, and according to the pace of the children, until I come to my Lord at Seir. And Esau said, please let me leave with you some of the people who are with me. But he said, what need is there? Let me find favor in the sight of my Lord. So Esau returned that day on his way to Seir. Jacob journeyed to Succoth, built for himself a house, made booths for his livestock. Therefore, the place is named Succoth. Now, Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, when he came from Paddan Aram and camped before the city. And he bought the piece of land where he had pitched his tent from the hand of the sons of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money. And he erected there an altar and called it Elohi Israel, which means a mighty God is the God of Israel. Yes, ma'am.
What they do is they don't have anything electronic, and they walk to work. They don't drive for that period, and they make the booths and everything out of trees.
That's what Sukkot means, is booths. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's certainly the Feast of Booths is associated with it. And I get kind of confused on some of the modern terminology that they've come up with as far as keeping them all straight. But that is what the word means, is booths. That's why it was called Sukkot, because he built booths for his animals there, which is the same thing as saying stables, housing.
Picnic tables made of pure lumber, and she would only eat there in the evening, and she would walk to work, and she didn't let nobody could pick her up on the road. Then in New York, the lawyers and all over there, they kind of make just quick little basugas and stick it out on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
I just thought,
Yep. It's interesting. So the two major points that we learned from this big picture, which started back in what, chapter 31? Yeah. Chapter 31 through the end of 33 covers this big period of time where he ran from Canaan and ran away from Esau, and he stayed, and he married, and he had children, and then he goes back. There are two big things in this story that are important. One is the promise is made to Jacob. And so now it becomes Abraham was chosen, Isaac was the chosen one of his children, Jacob becomes the chosen one of Isaac's children. And then the second thing is his name is changed. And it's important that we understand his name being changed to Israel, talking about one who strives with God, but he became the father of what? The nation of Israel. When you read about Israel in the Bible, that's the descendants of Jacob. That's why they're referred to as the children of Israel. So he becomes the father of this great nation. That was part of what Abraham was promised, right? And so more and more of the story is being revealed to us about how God is fulfilling that promise. Particularly, there's a particular seed under consideration, right? All that other stuff that he promised Abraham is wrapping around that singular promise of, in your seed all nations will be blessed. All of this is the story about how God fulfilled that. His going to Haran for this time period, before he goes back to the land that they would inherit later, is God preserving him. Esau wanted to kill him. God protected him from that. Kept him there until it was safe for him to go back, and then sent him back. This is God preserving him so that he can, in fact, fulfill the promise that was made. And we're going to keep on going down this line, and that's what happens throughout much of the book of Genesis, is it's identified. This line that is fulfilling that promise that was made really first way back in chapter 3. From the seed of woman, everyone would be blessed. And then picked up again in Abraham's story. I have to stop. So we are at chapter 34 next time, and we are skipping some time. Chapter 34 is going to be later in his life, after he's lived there for a little while. Now, next Wednesday is the first Wednesday, so there'll be song service Wednesday, but the date will be the 4th. So October the 11th will be the next time we're here for this class. And so on October 11th, we'll pick up with chapter 34.
I have heard of a land on a faraway strand. In the Bible the story is told, where cares never come, never darkness nor gloom, and nothing shall ever grow old. In that beautiful land, on the faraway strand, no storms with their blast ever frown. The street, I am told, is paved with pure gold, and the sun